All right, welcome everybody. My name's Scott Maier. This is Drawing Together with Artists Network, and it's Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, where we draw together. So this is what we're working on today. This is a fun little kind of portrait of this Yorkie that I found. And I'm doing this to help kind of support and discuss the pet art competition. Best in Show is what it's called on Artist Network. So I pinned a link to that at the top of the chat, and it's also in the description below. So if you're interested in learning more about that, if you're an artist who creates pet portraits or images involving your pets, check out that competition. It's a new one. It's a lot of fun. So I thought for those of you who might be interested, let's focus on drawing pets for a little while and see if that can help, because there's still time to enter. I think the early bird deadline is still another month away or so, or three or 4 weeks. So check that out. We're going to do this portrait of this Yorkie today, and then I'm going to do a cat next week, and then I think I'm going to follow it up with a bird. So at least do 3 weeks of these, what I call these pet projects. So if you are just joining us, you're going to want to know that this show is all about us getting together and drawing together. I'm going to talk through some of the things that I think about when I draw, and I like to see everybody else kind of share their ideas as well. So the goal in all of this is to take some time out of our busy lives to draw and think about ways that we can continually advance our skills and our practice, because it takes a steady practice. So the challenge today with this little guy is to focus on trying to capture that expression, working with some of the unique texture there. And of course, he's got these really expressive ears and eyes. And so let's see if we can do that. So I had a lot of fun in this preparatory drawing, thinking through some of the primary issues that we can address. I will be working in charcoal today. So what do I have? I've got a couple. I've got the 6B, it's an extra soft. And then I have this other one that's also a soft. So a slight variation between the two, but they're relatively dark. And I've got my vine charcoal that will be building up some of the fundamental shapes, the building blocks of the drawing using the vine charcoal. My trusty blending stump. Let me there, that's a little bit better in focus. And I've got a variety of erasers. I've got, of course, my Kneaded eraser, my retractable rubber eraser, my Derwent one. I love this one. And of course, I have it shaved down to give me a nice sharp edge there that I can use for some of those fine details. And this is the creative mark of the Vanish eraser. I really like this one. It's a soft rubber eraser that can lift and pick up a lot of material. So, and I'm working on the Rives BFK cotton rag paper. So as with every episode, feel free to use whatever material you'd like. So we tackled complex subjects over the last 2 weeks. And for some of you working in pen and ink for that, I have a lot of respect and admiration that you tackled such a complex subject in pen and ink. But it just goes to show you that, again, this is all about kind of connecting with the materials that really work for us and that you want to go forward with. Again, I'll be working with charcoal, but hopefully a lot of these things that I'll be talking about will apply to graphite, pen and ink, any other material that you're working with. I saw some Conte drawings that you shared. And again, if you're wondering about sharing your work, you can find a link to the show page for this episode in the description below, where you can share your work when you're done. So feel free to share that or anything related to it. We just want to talk about art and share what we're doing. So welcome everybody. I love seeing all the familiar names and new names here. If you are new, I love to see where you're viewing from. We get people from all over the world. So let's get to it. If you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I'll do my best to address them as I can. I missed some of the comments last week, and I kind of regret that. So I'm going to try to do a better job this week of capturing all those. If you do have a question that I haven't addressed and you really want me to, feel free to type it. It just means that I missed it, because there can sometimes be a lot of action happening. So when I'm looking over here, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the chat. I also have a big version of the reference image over here, and I have the small one. So the screen in front of me shows what you see. So I see myself, I see the paper, and I see this little reference image there. So all right, welcome. Looks like a lot of people are excited about this one, so we're just going to get to it. So for those of you who have been following for a long time, these initial stages are all going to be very familiar. I like to start with a gesture drawing, because right now my brain is all over the place. It's been a while since I drew the initial drawing of the Yorkie. I need to connect myself with the materials and the subject, and I feel like the best way to do that is with some of these quick gestural marks. The thing that I'm reacting to now is just the basic shapes. I'm moving my eyes quickly back and forth between the subject and the paper. And I kind of have three things going on at once. I have this in front of me. I have the screen in front of me that shows that overhead camera. So I'm seeing that out of the corner of my eye. And I'm looking at the reference. And so all of those things are happening at once. And I know when I was first starting to draw, that was a bit of a challenge, trying to divide my attention in that way, trying to see the whole thing at once. Now, we've talked about that in this show in the past, that the idea that what we're doing when we're drawing is we're trying to synchronize our brains and our bodies a little bit. We're trying to create some unification there, right? And my initial understanding of this dog is very shallow. I don't really know what I'm looking at this point. I haven't taken much time to analyze it. So I don't want to have a drawing at this stage that suggests that I have a thorough understanding of the dog. I want a drawing that reflects my very shallow and limited understanding of the dog. So I'm just reacting to these big forms, and I'm trying to find the shapes more than the lines. So edges are going to be a really key factor in this drawing because of those fun little, especially around the ears, these kind of wisps of the fur that really add to the character of this dog. So if you follow along the contour of this subject, of this dog, you see that edge is really kind of constantly being broken. It's really just along the back where there starts to be kind of a sharper edge. So I just kind of have that in mind as I'm going, and that's why I'm addressing this as a series of shapes more than an outline. I'm trying not to think about eyes, nose, mouth. It's just shape. And there's a certain amount of instinct that comes into play here as I just let my observations kind of go, and as I kind of glance quickly at the subject, at the reference, see where am I being drawn to, pun intended. What do I need to react to, and just kind of go from there. And so one of the key advantages to working with a gesture first is it helps me to see is it going to fit on the page properly. I feel like he's a little bit small right now, so I might want to enlarge it. And so at this point I haven't committed much time to the drawing, so it makes it easy to make those big decisions about placement and about these large forms. If I had gone into this really kind of honing in on some of those details, it would have been really hard to move those things. So that's one of the advantages, again, of working with a gesture. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to wipe this down. I have a second sheet of this paper underneath, and that provides a little bit more softness. Sometimes working directly on a board, it can translate some of the kind of bumps and imperfections on the board through to the surface of the paper. So I'm just wiping it down with a paper towel. Oh, here's my pen, or my Vine charcoal. All right, so I think, let's see, what am I going to do? I'm going to try to do my best to, I have these faint marks here, but let me try to ignore them at this point and essentially take another stab at this. It's like in figure drawing. When I would teach that, we would often, do 20 or 30 really quick 1-minute gestures just to kind of warm up and loosen up. And that can be really helpful. I feel like quick gestural drawing is sometimes less appreciated for its benefit to help artists grow. I've grown so much by spending time thinking about my gestural work. Because if you think about each little gesture drawing, even if you're drawing for a minute, is a drawing that that in some ways expresses so many issues that are important for drawing. And so you can grow quite rapidly by doing a lot of quick gestures. Because once we get into the stages where we're refining and thinking about texture and detail and things like that, that takes up a lot of time without a whole lot of real advancement in a specific skill. It's good for the hand-eye coordination. I think it's important to pay attention to those things, but when you think about these gestures, there's so much value in them. So I've placed him kind of really smack dab in the center. And I think if my goal is to capture the expression, kind of the character of this dog here, what do I want? How do I want that composition to read? You know, I feel like it's just a little bit static being placed in the center, and especially since we have this strong gesture here. So if we think about the major thrust in this pose, we have this, and then we have to turn in the tilt of the head like this, right? And so if I shift things over, what it's going to do is it's going to reinforce and kind of pull more attention into that thrust here, and hopefully, and it might make a little bit more movement. So let me try that now that I haven't, or since I haven't really put a whole lot of time into this at this stage, I can move it. And one of the reasons I like to just kind of wipe it down with a paper towel and show some of these marks, I'm not erasing it, is that it helps me to see where the new placement should be. Because I have this natural instinct that, that pulled me to create these gestures, these 2 attempts so far, and placing it right in the center. Now I'm starting to build up some of that muscle memory, and if I'm not really conscious about it, I'm more likely just to put those marks there again. So if I were to erase these marks clean, there's a good chance that I'm just going to end up doing again what I did. Or I'll be thinking so much about the new placement that I won't be able to really immerse myself in that loose gestural kind of expressive mark making that I want at this stage. So I'm just going to shift these marks over just a little bit here. And part of what's driving my decision making with my marks right now is just kind of where I'm at kind of emotionally and mentally, right? So I feel the need to kind of move around a little bit more. There might be some days where I feel like I need these marks to be more precise and controlled just to affect my mental state, right? So it's not perhaps the clearest and most actionable kind of comment to hear say, I'm just going with what feels good. But I think that's an important part of the drawing process. That's why I draw. When it comes down to it, I draw because it's about that engagement between myself and the materials and the image, right? And what it's doing up here. It feels good. It relaxes me. It brings me into focus. It connects my head and my body together in a way that, sometimes it can feel like there's so much going on in this life that I just feel kind of lost and less connected than I'd like to be. And so that's the role that drawing serves for me. And then if I almost see it as an added benefit that I have the potential to walk away with an image that I enjoy looking at. But again, it's one of the things we talked about in the series before, that the difference between drawing and the drawing. And it can sometimes be helpful to spend some time to really reflect on what that relationship looks like for you. For some of you, it's going to be all about the drawing, and some of you, it's going to be about the act. And we're all going to be somewhere in the middle with varying degrees of that. So I'm kind of sticking with this gesture a bit longer than I might in other drawings, partly just because of the way it feels, and another just because I want to create something that's perhaps a bit more expressive than what I might otherwise be inclined to do. I'm going to start by establishing some dark marks over here to not only is there something dark in the photo behind there, I don't know if that's the side of a couch or something. I chose this photo because it looked like, oh, you might be able to take a photo like this of your own pet. It's one of those candid moments. Of course, it's a beautiful shot, really nice light. I don't know if I could take a photo that nice. I do have the credit for the photographer, so check it out. And it's in the description. But I wanted to kind of choose something that felt a little bit more natural. And in this case, that dark space there helps to play with the balance between light and dark in this alternating sequence of light to light. And there's more light here, but back into dark. And then the way those ears kind of break up that space. Compositionally, I find interesting. The other element that I haven't really addressed at this stage is the fact that my eyes are out of focus at this point. I'm not looking at with any degree of precision. It's all out of focus. So when I'm squinting, it might be more apparent, but I realize that it may not look like I'm actually doing anything, but my eyes are in soft focus right now. All right. So now I want to spend a little bit of time really focusing on basic angle sighting. And so I'm going to do a little work on that. So the marks that I'm making now are to help establish the main angles. It's the diagonal lines that really add life and energy to a drawing or any subject. The horizontal lines tend to have a calming, more stabilizing effect, and then having a contrast between angles, kind of angled lines and horizontal lines, can also be interesting. Now in this case, I really want to get these primary angles correct. And so one of the ways I'm doing that is I'm locking my gaze on the subject below me, but I'm putting my peripheral awareness on what's happening on the drawing. So I'm practicing an indirect gaze. It's really a skill that I rely on a lot. So the idea with an indirect gaze is that you're splitting your attention to some degree. You're focusing on the subject, but you're also being aware of what's happening adjacent to it. Or sometimes you can see things more clearly by looking a little bit offset. So actually focusing on an area adjacent to the area you're targeting, and really kind of reflecting on that, and it can show you something unique about the subject. So in this case, I'm looking at some of these main lines, and I'm trying to make connections between these broken areas. So if we have this angle of the back, you can start to see how it might continue on up to this side of the ear. There's this curve of the ear. You can almost follow down into here. This side of the ear can almost come down here. But I'm looking to see if there are areas where I can make that connection, and that the goal there is to be thinking about a sense of unity. Right? So there's a lot of marks on here now, and it's breaking up the surface. And I need to be mindful of the unification of all of these. Make it all feel like they belong together, and that the form feels cohesive. I bring this line down here. I can start to observe how that track might lead me into some of these other forms, how they might intersect with some of these dark shapes. I want to think about, there's an edge here. What is the slight difference in the angle between these two? And having that soft gaze can be helpful in seeing those main forms. If you start looking with any sort of precision and detail, you could run into some trouble. So now I can start to kind of correct and slowing things down a little bit, starting to pay attention to kind of now increasingly smaller areas. Hello everybody. I see a lot of familiar names. If you are new, shout out where you're from. And if you are new, I know a lot of you have said in the past, maybe watch for a little while and it may take you some time to comment. So if you're inspired to comment today, and I want to encourage that. So I'm going to do some subtractive drawing here, using the eraser to shift my thinking into the the negative space here. So the negative space is the shape around the subject that you're looking at. In this case, there's that light area here. So if you look at that as a distinct shape, does it give us any information about the subject? I think I need to, I haven't done any kind of measuring with precision at this point, but I do think I need to kind of bring this over a little bit, just my basic interpretation. Start to adjust the shape of the eye. And as these shapes start to form, now you have more information to use to help guide the placement of your marks. So before I place any mark, I try to, as best I can, do a quick check-in where I am in the rest of the drawing. Kind of triangulate it a little bit. So as I'm working on these marks on the eye, for example, I'm doing a quick check-in where I am relative to especially this ear, but then I also have the nose that's starting to form. And just to kind of put myself into check there. And this is that vanish eraser, which I think lifts material really nicely. So at this point, the drawing is really looking quite a bit like what I'm actually seeing when I look at the subject. All right. Hello from Sweden. Awesome. I'm glad you're enjoying the demo. So wiping it down again. I don't know, it may feel like I'm just like doing work and then just getting rid of it, but all that work is really important. The way I think about it is as though I'm doing essentially 10 or 20 drawings, just one after the other, one on top of one another. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience of doing a drawing, completing a drawing, maybe then doing it again, and you're like, wow, that second one is better. And then maybe do another one, and you're like, well, this third one, I'm really starting to nail it, and then maybe a fourth one. And that can take a lot of time. And I'm trying to like condense that all into one process. I'm thinking through the whole drawing at once. I'm just kind of developing. I'm like, these early drawings are just going to be loose and expressive, and these later drawings are going to have a bit more precision. And each time I approach it, I'm going to carry the learning from the previous one into the next one, and I'll get to a kind of a quicker kind of point where of accuracy. All right, I think, let's see. I need to do some quick measuring now, and I'm going to give myself some indicator marks here. So some of the things that are kind of important to me, and this is where I think it'd be really interesting to hear from you all. When you're at the stage where you're really kind of adjusting the proportions, we all have to make decisions about what areas to focus on. So if we use comparative measuring, for example, the role of comparative measuring is to take one section of the subject, that becomes our base unit of measure, and we're going to compare that to other dimensions. And so, for example, if the ear here becomes my standard unit, if I take the height of that ear and I compare it to the width, between the ears, the height of this ear, the distance between the eyes, the height of the head, the length of the back, you can use that one unit of measurement as a way to help really kind of bring all of those proportions together. So you're thinking about the scale of those marks in relationship to that one aspect. Now, you may use the distance between the eyes as your base unit. Or maybe the distance between the ears, the height of the head, the width of the head, the height of this ear. You know, I'd be curious to see what you do. The other thing about it that I think about are the intersection points. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on now. It's like maybe if I have a mark that indicates the tip of the ear, I could start to see an axis there. I place a mark here that represents that point of contact from the ear where it shifts to the light fur here, and then this part here. There are very specific dimensions and angles that connect between them. Do some angle sighting. So I'm closing one eye, aligning this with an angle I'm targeting in the reference, and I'm bringing it over, placing it on top of this to compare the angles. And I feel like I got those basic proportions just about right. I'm going to take an angle sight. Yeah, maybe bring this up a little bit. So now I'm almost just kind of creating a connect the dots type of scenario. So before I place this dot, I'm thinking about where it is relative to the tip of the ear, where it is relative to this side of the ear, and where it is relative to those. I also have kind of eyes forming. And so I'm trying to kind of move my way through the entire form of the dog without following along the contour. It's all kind of crisscrossing rather than outlining or cross-contouring, contour lining it. Dita van Stiprian, making lines in my head. Yes, there's a lot of pre-visualization, it sounds like, happening there. So hopefully, I'm going to do my best to try to make it clear what marks I'm trying to indicate here and how I'm checking in with some of the forms. Put a little smile there. That's fun. That totally changes the drawing. But yeah, just to put that little expressive mouth there. But I'm gonna keep it because it makes it more fun to look at, to have a little face there. So. So again, my gaze right now is primarily fixed on the reference, and I'm really just glancing down at the page just to kind of do a quick check-in to make sure I'm kind of in the right spot. And there's that little collar thing, tag. I've been reflecting on that, the idea of how hard it is sometimes to come up with words when I'm drawing, because you think in terms of shape, value, texture, all of these things that are visual, right? And sometimes you understand in a pure guttural way, and it's hard to kind of describe it. And so sometimes it makes it harder for me to really identify specific words, kind of shifting that mode. All right, what am I doing? I guess I'm feeling pretty good about these overall proportions at this stage. Maybe bring that down a little bit. All right. I like your comment too. It's alive. Yeah, in Mad Moments Go. Yeah, it is a happy little dog. I wanted to kind of do that, capture that expression, I think. So, now I want to kind of. I think I want to shift to the contour a little bit, shift away from the thinking of the shape, but I really want to make sure that I get The central axis correct. It's something that I think about quite a bit. You know, there are so many drawing books, so many drawing tutorials out there, right? And each instructor, each author, each artist is going to essentially use the same tools, but we're going to put them in a different order. You know, it's all about the decisions we make, right? When we're making decisions as we're drawing, and sometimes that the decision is to not decide, it's just to let things go, and sometimes it's to be very controlled over our decision. But we can organize some of those decisions in different ways, and that's going to create a unique path for us through the completion of the drawing. And so for some of you, you may want to start with a central axis for the head to get that tilt right. Some of you may want to start with a basic shape to help do that. I have found that I generally do better when I apply that later, after I've created an initial gesture and I've built the shapes as I've done here. But I guess I want to put that out there to see how you all feel about that, and what, I don't know, what ways does your process kind of differ? And hopefully you're at the point where you're kind of trusting that to some degree. You know, sometimes when we watch another person paint or draw, we just want to try out a little bit to see what they do and kind of put ourselves in their shoes. But we also have kind of our own instincts that we need to follow. Okay. We've talked about that here as well. You know, sometimes you just make a mark that you really like and you want to just leave it, even if it's not accurate, or you know, if it's not kind of photorealistic, you know, or you know, you just say, I want to keep that mark for whatever reason. Here's what's bothering me now. All right, and as I'm seeing this, I need to double check this dimension here, this dimension to the width. So it gets really tricky because he's got such a fuzzy contour. It's hard to identify a specific area. But I think what I want to do is try to take this distance here between this. There's this shadow on this side, and then there's this here. That establishes the width of the head. And I'm going to compare it to the height. So where am I going to do that? I'm going to target, so right here, the intersection of the collar to that light catching on its cheek. So kind of creates a division there. And I think I'm going to first compare it to then that height. So I'm going to compare this width to there. So closing one eye, that flattens my depth perception. And when I hold this charcoal out, I'm aligning this end here with that part, sliding my thumb down so it lines up with that part over the reference photo. And I'm turning it. And what I observe is that at this distance here, when I turn it, it should put me, wow, it is right. So right about here, just above, it's above the top of the head, about a third of the way up that ear. So perhaps I'm more accurate at this stage than I anticipated. So what that tells me is that I feel like I'm in the ballpark here. And there must be something else going on that's distorting my perception of these proportions. So when I look at the gesture and I look at the reference, something seems off. So I'm just going to trust it for now. And I say that for now because as I go through, it's going to change. All right, so now when I look at this, if I get the tilt of the head right, and I'm just trying to assess the average of that, then the axis that the eyes follow along is going to be perpendicular to that. So if I have that angle, this is going to be turned 90 degrees, and that should align the eyes and then the mouth. And I'm still using a soft focus with my eyes, and I'm looking at the small thumbnail. I'm really doing as much as I can to eliminate as much information as possible and see this as an abstract arrangement of just shapes and such. So, okay. I'm going to keep those marks on there for now, and I don't know why. Oh, Sue, I didn't see your comment up there. Nose and cheek too far to the left. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, so at this point, I'm gonna put that in my back pocket right now. Because at this point, I can't really see the eyes and the nose from my perspective when I'm with my eyes out of focus. So I'm trying to get these broad areas correct. And then from there, I will kind of place the eyes and the nose with a bit more precision. Okay. I don't know if there's a lot of noise coming through the mic or not. It sounds like somebody's outside with a leaf blower. So it's that time of year here in Colorado. We got some beautiful fall color this year, but it seems like people on the East Coast are a little bit delayed from where you might expect things to be. All right, so still using the Vine charcoal. It's going to be permanent enough for me at this stage, and then I want to keep these soft marks. Then I'm going to come back in with the compressed charcoal to make more permanent marks. All right. Oh, thank you, Sue. Thank you. And for those of you watching, Sue is making some observations about the drawing that are really helpful. And so if you have any as well, feel free to do that. I know it can seem a little weird, and there may be other shows you watch or something where you don't feel like being able to comment on those things as part of the show, but it is part of this one. So. Okay, I'm going to keep those edges loose. I think I need to put away the Vine charcoal. Just going to do it. Use my compressed charcoal. Maybe wipe away some of the residue. All right, so now we soften out of focus. We're going to bring him into focus here. So let's see. Oh, the top of the head could be tilted more. Yeah, there is something off here. I feel like what I need to do is break that down into two turns. There's kind of a flat part and then and that exaggerates it. But there's kind of a quality to that head that that I'll need to address. All right. Mad Bonus Ghost saying, dog reminds you of Gizmo. Yes, totally. All right. Here's what I'm going to do now. What am I going to do? I said that statement with confidence and I had nowhere to go because I don't know where I'm going with that. Let's see. What am I going to do? All right, I think what I need to do is I'm going to drop the tone down in the background. So I have this paper towel again that I've been kind of building up some charcoal on. And I want to build it up over the whole page. And if you're doing that in your drawing, one of the things you may notice are some of these little fingerprints because I wasn't very careful when I was handling the paper. So that's what's happening there. I have greasy fingers, and now it catches the charcoal and it makes these little blotches. And I just kind of live with it. If it gets really distracting for you though, so like there's a little dark spot there, if you do need to lift it, a kneaded eraser works well. You can just kind of press and kind of lift, and then kind of smudge, and just kind of work the area that way. I don't know. I don't mind those marks. That's just adds texture as far as I'm concerned. All right. Let me me do this. I kind of like the sense of light that's coming out. I'm hesitating here, and I'm trying to figure out why. I think what I need to do is I need to see what's going to happen with the value. So I need to do some negative drawing. I'm using this bigger eraser on purpose. It lifts more material, and I want to avoid getting into any sort of precise edges at this point. That's why I'm using this one. I could be using the kneaded eraser as well. There we go. And I think that helps me having some of this value structure kind of in mind a little bit. I remember there was a time when I was super precious with the white of the paper. And I feel much more free now that I just kind of gotten over trying to control that. If anybody's new, if you're just joining us, what you're watching is Drawing Together. My name's Scott Maier, and I'm with Artist Network. We do this every Wednesday. So if you're not ready to draw today, come back next week or watch any of the old episodes. We're at 115. Holy smokes! That's a lot of episodes. Starting to get a little carried away now with this eraser, but it's a lot of fun. If you don't spend a lot of time doing this subtractive drawing, it can be a lot of fun, and I kind of encourage that as a way to help kind of develop some other skills. You know, I know some artists that work kind of exclusively in that method, but to me it just provides additional context of the subject. I think I erased a little bit too much there. All right, now we talk about this also in the show. There's going to be a point at which your drawing starts to really shift from being this arrangement of two-dimensional shapes on the page in your mind, and all of a sudden it's a three-dimensional object, and then your marks start to change as well. And so at this point I'm just thinking about arranging these light and dark shapes, but I'm starting to see that there is a three-dimensional quality, and that's really exciting at that point. So let's see. Oh, and then Michelle Marie is saying, how is your charcoal pencil so sharp? So I use this, and I just shave it like this. And then that exposes more of the core of the pencil so that I can use it on its side. And so actually I'll do that right now. I'm going to start to work with it. And I don't use the tip of the pencil to draw with a whole lot. Until the end. And so if you work with it on the side of the pencil, you're always sharpening it. So you always have that sharp point to get to. And when you're working on the side of the pencil, you get some really interesting marks. It encourages the kind of focus on shape over line. So that's why I prefer to work in an overhand grip like this. So I'm just going to kind of go through and work my way out from the eyes, outward. I want this to be kind of the focal point. Let's see. JB Wild Photos, in my art class today we had to draw things under a microscope. That is awesome. That is really cool. Drawing wood textures and stuff, that is really cool. I don't think I've ever drawn under a microscope. I do have an interest in optical devices and what they teach us about the nature of drawing and the subjects that we, the subjects that we study through our work. But if you're not comfortable with a straight overhand grip, I like this kind of modified grip. So what I do is I either wedge the pencil between my different sets of fingers and just kind of roll over, and then I could stabilize with with these fingers. So it gives me the stability of, you know, the traditional kind of tripod grip, but it allows me to use the side of the pencil a bit more, and it kind of discourages the fine detail. It kind of encourages more arm movement that way, at least for me. So, and then of course I've got this pencil extender because I've probably got 100 little kind of stubs of charcoal pencils that I'm trying to use up. So I'm using this pencil extender that Jerry's had sent out. This was we did a materials giveaway for the 100th episode. So I just need to continue to squint at the subject. And at this point, in essence, I'm kind of replacing the vine charcoal shapes with now compressed charcoal, things that are a little bit more permanent. But at the same time, I want to make some adjustments. You're always contributing to the form. That's one of the kind of mantras of the class, I guess, is to always contribute to the form. So whether you're using an eraser or your charcoal or a blending stump, it's an opportunity to make adjustments to the proportions, the overall shapes, etc. And I'm kind of just thinking through the overall structure and flow. So one of the keys to texture is, of course, you want the texture to reinforce the form of the subject. And in this case, the texture and the subject are really one thing. If I would always get into trouble when I would think about texture as a stage in the drawing where I'm just adding it onto it. And then when I kind of realized that they all work together, then it made my texture work more effective. And the idea is that my goal is ultimately to create a sense of form and volume. So I can look at the direction that the fur is laying across the head, around the eyes, around the mouth, etc. I can look at all those directions and I can use that to inform the direction of my marks. And in that way, so then some of the marks that I'm making will form the texture that may get refined later on. All right, that's a little too small. So I'm going to use the larger the larger image that's off to my left up here. But I need to squint. Oh, okay. Julie is saying, I have an allergy to charcoal. What can I substitute it with? You know, I think a lot of the processes that I go through, like my graphite drawing is essentially the same. And so if you haven't tried a block of graphite, that might be useful. And now the graphite I just remember when I was younger, the graphite seemed to just be limited in its range. And then like an ebony pencil, I discovered that, and I'm like, ooh, this gets nice and dark. And now there are increasingly darker tones of graphite. So you might experiment with that. And you might also try Conte. Now, Conte is a wax medium that is a bit more permanent, but it could be really helpful for you in terms of really discovering value relationships in that full value range. That's one of the nice things about charcoal, is that it gets so dark that it helps you to really understand value in a new way if you're used to working in graphite. And then the other thing is pastel. You know, so try, you know, soft pastels might be useful if that helps. I don't know. It may be, I don't know really what the source of the allergy is, if it's the dust or something, and it would just end up happening with Pastella too, or if there's something in the binder, or the charcoal, if it's charcoal specifically. But you might look into soft pastels. All right. doing a little bit more focus work. Mental focus, the thing looks very out of focus at this point. Okay. I apologize for the silence here. I imagine if somebody's joining right now, they're like, it's just a whole lot of quiet. I try to talk as much as I can to make it less uncomfortable, but sometimes I just need to focus. And I'm trying to calculate a little bit more the placement of some of these objects. I think what I need to do is, this shape is really bothering me. And it's bothering me because I think I have quite enough information. I think once I get the nose established, I think it will help. Now I'm observing that there's some light striking on the nose, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to treat it like a dark shape. Here we go. I think that does work a little bit better. And now the structure of the eye. Now I'm going to try to just treat this like a one large dark shape, and then gradually make it more specific. One of the things that I used to do a lot was I'd overstate the eyes, and that makes sense. We have a natural sense of awareness about the eyes, and we pay more attention to eyes than we do just about any other feature of the body, and so I would often, again, overstate them. And so it took some practice to really understand them from a structural perspective, the relationship between the values. So in this case, what really defines the eye, especially in this side where it's in the shadow, there's just one little highlight, and there's just some subtle variations in there. And then on this eye, there's the hair that kind of wraps up around the socket. There's the lower eyelid here, and then it's that highlight. And there's very little information there. So all right, but I feel pretty good about the kind of the overall gesture of the dog at this point, so I don't think I need to make any changes to that. Now at this stage, we talked about early on how I was looking at it through kind of that soft focus, and now I'm kind of shifting a little bit. I'm kind of coming in and out of focus. So I'll kind of, there's just this rhythm to it of kind of letting my eyes softly focus, see it all blurred, and then come into focus and then back out and back in. And what you're doing there, when you do that, is you're continually checking those details in the context of the whole subject. So I want to make sure that before I really do anything or commit to these marks, that they all fit together the way they should. So right in here, I think I want to, because there's that tilt, I'm almost feeling like this play between these dark shapes and then this light shape coming down here. And I want to reinforce that a little bit, kind of pull into the gesture by bringing this down perhaps a bit more than is evident in the reference photo. So I'm actually going to throw off the proportions a little bit. I'm going to veer from the reference in order to enhance that gesture. And then maybe what I'll do here is, if this is coming down, I'll bring this up to really enhance that twist in the torso. Almost make him a little bit more heroic, right? And so what is that going to mean? So that right now there's this edge here that in the reference photo leans this way. If I tilt it, if I make that more vertical, then what that might do is it provides a little bit of contrast to some of the angles, and it's should lift up that chest just a bit. So you can see two very minor things can sometimes have an impact on that gesture, and you may not notice it at first. And that's, I think, to me, that's the mark of kind of good adjustments. And you see this a lot with some great caricature artists. You know, sometimes it's super blown out. You know, like you see these massive changes in proportion, and that becomes very clear. Sometimes it's a bit more subtle, and it's in those little things that make it all work. So I'm feeling a little bit better about this gesture of it as a whole, but I wanted to kind of talk through some of those little things. And you may be more inclined to really enhance it farther, kind of really tilt the head, or maybe you're more inclined to really make it look like the photograph, and that either way is fine. You're in control of that. We got a lot of comments coming in, so I want to take some time to that. Let's see. I feel sorry for juries. We have 3 around us after a session with Scott. I go look for things. One store said, "Did that teacher just suggest this?" That's awesome. And then Sue, I've heard that pan pastels have less loose powder to deal with. Oh, that's interesting. I've never really worked with pan pastels, but give that a shot. And Pat is saying, Julie, I can't work with charcoal either. I use graphite every week, usually an 8B. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you, Pat. And then Wilma is saying pan pastels have minimal dust. I do have to worry about charcoal, and it's something that I didn't think about a whole lot when I was younger. I would work on these giant life-size drawings, and I would just be breathing in all that charcoal, and then it would all blow out, and I'm like, oh my God, my whole insides are dark, and that was foolish. And so I do try to be a little bit more mindful of when I blow. I just try to dust things off rather than blow and really kick that dust up. And I'm a bit more gentle with the charcoal dust than I was in the past. So it is a safety concern I think everybody should pay attention to, even if it hasn't risen to the level of an allergy or a severe sensitivity. So I'm glad you're talking about that. Let's see. Yeah, so I think Susan has some observations about the proportions here on the left. Yeah, I think I will have to adjust that, I think, a little bit. I'm going to kind of pin that a little bit because what I think I need to do is resolve some of this area and then adjust this accordingly. So, but I appreciate you bringing that up, and I may need you to remind me later, because I may totally forget about that. So, all right, Marla, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us. All right, because I think going back to this, one of the things that kind of comes to mind is that the idea of bringing this down a little bit, the light down here on those cheek whiskers. It kind of makes me think of another point. Is, with something like this, with all this texture, you have the option of deciding how much your drawing should reflect the reference photo precisely, or is it just an indicator, a launching off point? You want to let your marks be loose and expressive and let them go. And we're gonna each have our own kind of association with that. So if you feel so compelled just to, I don't know, let the photo be a jumping off point and then let the texture kind of go. I mean, I'm not going to worry too much about placing each kind of strand of that fur precisely relative to the photo, just because to me that's not really what the photo is about. But I do want to kind of capture the spirit of that in such a way that it perhaps doesn't become super noticeable that it doesn't match the photo exactly. There's something, the way these tufts of fur come out from the ears and over here, that I want to make sure it captures that spirit. But if I'm off a little bit, then I think I'm okay with that. But I'm just kind of saying that because I found for myself that when I articulate that, when I'm clear myself what that threshold is in terms of accuracy, then I can move forward a little bit more confidently in my work. It would always trip me up when I would kind of be wishy-washy about that, or I would pivot in the middle of the drawing. And so I try to be a little bit more clear about what my expectations are for myself, and what my threshold is with regards to accuracy. All right, I'm going to shift to this blending stump. So what I'm thinking about is kind of gesture. Ultimately what I'm trying to do is just smooth things out. We have the tooth of the paper showing through, and I want to smooth it out. But I'm going to use this as an opportunity, again, to contribute to the form. So I'm thinking about the direction of the marks relative to some of the, some of the strands of fur there. So if anything, I'm going to use the direction of those marks just to, again, to reinforce the form. Always be contributing to the form, unless you don't want to do that. So that was kind of a non-committal thing. So do what I suggest or don't. I guess that's just where my head's at. And so I'm kind of observing now the flow of the fur as it wraps up and around the head into that eye socket. Now the other thing that I did a lot when I was younger that I really tried to correct is this mentality of kind of looking at the subject, taking a quick snapshot, then looking at the drawing and just draw from that quick snapshot. I'm trying to make an observation, make a mark. Go back, make an observation, make a mark. So that each mark stands for something as much as I can. And I'm saying that out loud again as to, I think, a lot to my own, just to help hold me accountable to that, because I definitely fall in that trap of getting absorbed in the mark making, that I forget to look at the subject and forget that the drawing is ultimately about that subject, not necessarily the mark making. Sometimes it is the mark making, but this one it isn't. I want to make it look, I wanted to make it feel like it's in some way understanding the subject more deeply. Okay. How's everybody doing? Impression versus realization, yes. Oh, Wilma's saying, yeah, I had a handheld vacuum. Where did that go? I don't know, I put it somewhere. I keep forgetting to use it. It's one of those things about drawing, like there's so many habits that we form. And I think that's one of the benefits that I have with this show is that having feedback and comments from you and having to speak about what I'm doing, it gets me to reflect on some of those habits that I should be using that vacuum more, and I don't know what I did with it. It's around here somewhere. Now, with the blending stump, this is a well-used one, so it's really loaded with that charcoal. If you're working with graphite, it's going to do the same thing. I try to have some stumps that are for charcoal and some that are only for graphite, because they can sometimes not play well together. But, that's not to say, I have grabbed graphite stumps before and used them in a charcoal drawing. All right, I'm stuck here. What am I doing? So what happened is that I kind of placed that, there's this kind of overlap happening here, the fur that comes this way and then up here. But then I'm noticing that this is too short, and so, but I do know that I I brought this down. So that could be affecting it, or I'm placing this incorrectly. So I'm just evaluating this. I think I need to come down a little bit more. So it's just in line with the right side of this eye here is that dark mark. Okay, how are we doing on time? We're about an hour in. Not too bad. Generally, these go about 2 hours, so we'll stick with it for a little while and see how it goes. Yeah, so many tools, so little time. You're right, Sue. And Wilma's saying, yeah, the trouble is if you blow the dust, you're sending it into the air that you breathe, not good. Instead, tap the back of your support board by holding the drawing over a trash container. I think that's much better. Of course, I recognize that I kind of blew away some of the particles earlier, so I'm going to do my best to try to keep that in mind too. And I do want to find that little vacuum cleaner now, but I got to stay focused. Found myself getting a little distracted. Oh my gosh, and Mad Moments Go say, I did that with an underwater pastel drawing of a dolphin, blew off the dust, and saliva went all over it. Oh no! That can be troublesome. Okay. So the benefit of using this blending stump too is it also is a helpful tool to suggest some of these locks of that fur. And so I just, it's just these kind of short flicks, letting that blending stump roll in my fingers as I go, trying to create variety. I'm trying to avoid creating a sense of rhythm, these rhythmic marks that just kind of march their way down the side of the dog here. So I'm trying to avoid that. And now here we have this dark area that's being overlapped by this light fur, and so then it's almost like a scooping motion as I'm lifting into that area, and then hopefully what it's doing is adjusting that positive and negative spatial relationship to bring that light area forward. All right. Fun little drawing. All right. I need to adjust this. I'm saying the word all right a lot. The word's all right. I feel like that's a little bit better. Now, let's add another layer of specificity. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this background. I'm going to come back into this. I'm going to kind of work my way out from the center, the center of focus. I want to pull some attention into the eyes. So I'm going to, again, use the side of my charcoal pencil a bit. And then if you just roll your pencil, you can engage the tip a little bit more to get more detail. And so what I'm doing is I'm starting from kind of the larger shape, and I'm going to gradually refine it farther. There's this light striking here. Some interesting shapes. So I'm thinking about, again, the positive and negative space. And you'll find that if you use the side of your pencil, and as you just kind of let it rock a little bit, and if you keep rolling it, then it will it'll always give you a sharp edge. And so in that way, I try to create these fine lines of the fur just using the side of the pencil. I can sometimes make marks that feel more naturally formed. So I'm just, again, just refining the larger shapes around the eyes right now. Anybody new here, just joining for the first time? Anybody just tuned in and it's like, what the heck are we watching? We're watching Drawing Together. We draw every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Pick a new subject to try to challenge ourselves, to grow our skills in particular ways. Wilma, I appreciate the comments, and we sure miss you when you're not here. So, but I get it. It's hard to make all of the sessions. And so as I'm starting to create these more refined marks, you can see I'm using this overhand grip, and I'm supporting the tip of the pencil a little bit more. That gives me a little bit more control. But it's really this kind of scooping, this rocking motion that I'm giving it. And that creates these kind of finer edges. All right, so I think I need to come back in with this and smooth out a bit. What I'm going to do, now I'm going to bring out this eraser here. Let's give a little bit of life to this guy's eyes. I'm going to lift up the little highlight here. There's two of them. And so I'm going to overstate the reflections. They're too big right now. And then I'm going to cut them. I'm going to cut back out. I'm going to cut into them with the charcoal. So the same with this light striking along that lower eyelid. So again, overstating the highlights and then coming back in with the side of the pencil to sharpen. And the way I think about it is starting from kind of the center of the form, working up to the edges of those reflections here and in here. And then right in here, there's this dark edge right along in here. There, it brings a little bit of life to this dog's eyes. And then the kind of the eyebrows kind of emerge from this dark area here. So that required a little bit more focus, so a little less talking. And then I'm going to go over to this eye here and see if I can extract a little bit more information about what's happening. It's so dark in the reference photo, I need to really look. So when you're dealing with very narrow value shifts, if you're studying two things and you know that they're different values, but that it's just really hard to see, this is where that indirect gaze can sometimes come in handy. I find that often if you offset your vision a little bit, you actually become more sensitive to value relationships. And so if I'm looking in here to actually study the shape of the eyeball, I'm putting my focus here, but putting my awareness on this, if that makes sense. So again, it's that indirect gaze that can be really valuable. That when we're that center of focus for us, when we're really sharply focused on something, that center of focus is more primed to understand texture and some of those detail elements, and less sensitive to color shifts and value shifts. And so we often actually overstate them. We see things as higher contrast than they actually are. So if you just offset your vision a little bit, you shift your focus to the area adjacent to your kind of target area, you may observe something about that value relationship or a color shift that can be valuable to you. That happens a lot when I'm out landscape painting. You know, look at the sky, but evaluate the blue of the distant mountains. Or I'll fix my focus on a tree in the foreground, but be thinking about the color behind it. And so in that way, I'm thinking about that for these areas here. Now, let's see. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, Tammy, welcome back. It makes me so happy to hear people continuing to draw. I don't know, but I was just talking about it with a coworker. One of the things that kind of frustrates me is when I hear people who really love to draw, but then associate it with being an artist, right? You have to, and for some reason, I'm like, well, they'll say, well, I'm just not an artist or whatever. Well, that doesn't mean you can't draw. Like, an artist is the profession, right? You know, it can be a mindset, it can be all of these things, but drawing is a practice. It's a thing that anyone can do. It's just like, you know, when people go to a club to go dancing, they don't say, well, I'm just not a professional dancer. There's sometimes it feels like we start to apply a label to drawing as though that person is somehow then making a career decision to become a selling artist. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but I feel like there's a reason why we as humans started drawing on cave walls 40,000 years ago or more, and it had nothing to do with selling work. So with this sharp edge of this eraser, you can start to lift off some of these fine lines where the highlights are. And you can see there's a bit of a kind of a rocking motion. Just kind of be mindful of the, again, the rhythm of your marks. Break that up, make a few marks, move along. It's really easy to fall into that trap of again, start with a light pressure. When you use it with a light pressure, it can sometimes just blend, and it kind of functions like a blending stump. And then you can lean in on it a little bit more if you need to lift more material. So here we have this large kind of clump of fur where it's catching the light on this outside, rolling into shadow. So I'm going to try to pull out the highlights here. So now we're doing subtractive drawing, but we're making kind of positive statements. You know, we're drawing the fur, drawing the light. We're just using the eraser to do it. Ray W. saying, I did not think I could make friends with charcoal, but watching Scott is kind of fun and relaxing. Oh, that's good. It's good to hear. And it sounds like, Tammy, you're feeling the same way. I totally get it. I've always loved charcoal personally, but I've had many students that say, no, this is not for me. It's messy, and that's okay. You know, we all gravitate towards certain media. Now, here's the criteria that I use to think about the media that I work with, you know, whether it's oil paint or pastel or charcoal, graphite. One of the things that I look at is, I refer to it as working at the speed of thought, right? So we all have thoughts about the subject, you know, are connecting with our emotions, we're processing a lot of information, and there are certain media that will help us connect with that'll work at that same pace. You know, so for me, I really like to move the material around, and I like to kind of shift from being really big and expressive to really finely detailed. And I need a medium that can kind of work that way. That's why I struggle, I think, so much with colored pencil, is because I have a hard time really sculpting the material the way I'm comfortable with. Now, I say that knowing there's a voice in the back of my head saying that's exactly why I need to practice it. It needs to take me out of my rut. I need to think about changing up my relationship with the materials. And it doesn't mean that I'm committing to working with, say, colored pencil for the rest of my life. But I think working in a frustrating medium can really do a lot to teach me about the subject, about my relationship with materials, about mark making, color, all of these things. There's always something to learn from a new medium. But having said that, like I said, you may have some mediums that just you really connect with because it aligns with the pace at which your thoughts are being processed in your mind. So oil painting and charcoal really work for me perhaps better than watercolor or acrylic, even though I've worked with both before. And I may go through phases where, for whatever reason, I just feel like I need to stop working with oils and embrace another medium. So still sticking with the eraser, I'm just lifting off some of these light areas. So this is an opportunity to suggest the collar there. And I'm starting with the lights and to evaluate like what it does to the structure of that portion, this buckle thing. And to see if that triggers something. Sometimes just having the shape of a highlight can make the whole form come into place. That's something like Vermeer was really good at, right? You get the shape right, you get the highlight on just right, and it feels like it conveys far more information about the subject than is actually there. So, let's see. Tammy was out buying more paper. That is a really good reason to not be on time for this, as it were. So nice. Awesome, Ray. Yeah, definitely, try it out. I think it's important to try out everything. Monica's saying your charcoal used to intimidate me and I wouldn't ever try it. Looks like you're giving it a shot now, so that is awesome. All right, Tammy is saying that you're using charcoal in the Strathmore paper and it seems to work well, so that's awesome. That's good to hear. Okay. Deep breath. What am I doing? All right. So now I'm just evaluating the drawing. What I'm looking for are, now there's going to be this balance between it feeling kind of too finished or not finished enough. And when it's really hard to articulate, but some of these loose expressive marks that are totally unfinished may stay through the end of the drawing. They may be sufficient for the viewer to look at this, accept that as a shape of light, shadow, and then get beyond it and move to the focal point. And that's really ultimately what I want is a certain amount of acceptance in those marks. And when there's not enough information, it can draw your attention. And so I'm kind of looking for those areas where do I feel pulled to when I glance at it. And I have to try to imagine as though I'm looking at this for the first time, you're kind of coming to it with fresh eyes. And then with those fresh eyes, try to evaluate what needs more work. So as I look at this section here, I feel like I'm being pulled into the eyes and the nose, into that expression, which is what I want. And then when I'm there, I'm trying to connect with what's what's distracting me in that periphery, what's calling my attention. And right now, yeah, I think I need to move into the ears. The ears need another layer of finish applied to them, a little bit more refinement. And I realize what makes that little smile are these how dark it gets right in the corners of the mouth. And so now my attempt at, when I'm working in these other areas, again, is I'm going to keep coming back to this. Be focusing here, but evaluating what's happening in the periphery. And I know I keep saying that a lot. That seems to be a theme that's emerging for this episode. And I just want to keep making quick kind of stabs at these areas. I don't want to go right to the assumption that what it needs is a fine degree of refinement and of detail in order to make it work. I want to ease into it. I'm just going to add a little bit to each ear, kind of targeting the darker areas that could use more substance. Here, when I'm working with that dark area, as I encounter this edge of that light fur, then what I'm doing is I'm placing it on the paper and scooping up into that. And now, and the direction of the marks is established not by what's happening in here, but by the direction of that negative space, that fur that's actually on top of it. And then when I move over to this portion of the ear, I can kind of move out of that thinking a little bit. And then there's what I'm missing right now is some contrast in the light that's in the ear. So if both of these ears, there's a light side and then there's some shadow. And so right in here is where it falls into shadow. So having that two-tone gray area helps to establish that light side, shadow side. And then I'm going to let some of these whiskers be a little bit sharper, some be softer. And hopefully that creates some nice variation. Trying to just change up the marks. And again, just using the side of the pencil, just kind of scooping with it. So I feel like in some way I'm exaggerating the fur. Maybe I'm not exaggerating enough, but again, it's about capturing that spirit of the animal. And so, and to kind of reiterate, if you missed the top of the show, what inspired this episode is the new pet portrait competition that we have on Artist Network. So there's a link at the top of the chat, and it's in the description as well. So it's called Best in Show. If you have a painting or drawing of a pet, I think there are a couple categories. There's dog and cat, and then other. And then this is just kind of meant to kind of provide a little bit of support for that. So Deanne Webb is saying the little guy needs a chin. He does need a chin. Thank you for that. Yeah, as I step back, I gave him a little bit of an indication of a mouth, but it's all flat under here. Let's see. You're welcome, Liz. Let's see. All right, Wilma, I'm glad it's been helpful. I can't tell you how important this series has been to me over the year and a half We launched this in March of last year, and precisely in response to that pandemic, the idea that we're all stuck in home, including me, and it's been tremendous connecting with all of you. All right, here's what I think I want to do. I want to provide a little bit more that light catching on the top of the head here. This right here, I'm losing a little bit of structure, and then here, as Deanne was saying, the chin I think could use a little bit more support. So I'm going to start by just kind of lightly indicating that edge, and then think about the way the fur kind of wraps up and around it. Sharpen in some areas. Get a little reflected light in there. So that you can see the pencil is no longer sharp, but I'm still able to achieve some sharp lines using the side of the pencil. But I also know that I have another pencil here kind of in my back pocket if I need to really get in there with a sharp edge. So part of what makes the fur kind of come to life would be that play between the light and the dark, right? So, working from the dark into the light areas, and then from the light into the dark areas using the eraser. So kind of keep working back and forth. If you're not seeing that light area project forward and create the form you're going for, just keep working that edge, and I'm confident that it'll eventually come together. All right, so what do I need to do here? This is a little tricky, so I'm gonna, a little bit of light that catches on there under the chin. That helps. Fun. So just using the eraser, on its side, kind of like a pencil. Just really gentle with it to see what the response is. And part of it too is I need to evaluate the screen in front of me, that overhead shot, because when I look here, it's a bit different. That's equivalent to stepping back. So if you're following along and you haven't stepped back from your work, it's a good idea to do that. I think I need to lift a little bit in here. Whew. How many of you are really just kind of consumed by the detail of this whole thing? Kind of curious. All right, I'm going to provide a little bit more structure for the collar. I feel like that's necessary. So when I'm doing that, I'm thinking about when I'm making the dark marks outside the edge of that collar. I'm trying to think about the direction of the fur more than anything. Just make a bit more kind of confident marks in here, but I don't want to get pulled into the weeds, those details. But right now he's just kind of floating in the space and almost feels like some sort of glamour shots or something. A little weird. So I do want to anchor him down a bit. Pull out the blending stump. And I think what I need to do is really, like I said, I need to anchor there, so that light spot then feels like light, not just empty paper. Maybe what I'll do is actually bring some of this value down in here. Darken that. Just think about flow, the way the fur is kind of flowing along there. Let the tooth of the paper do some of the work. And again, if I'm looking for that balance between kind of accuracy and expression, and again, what is supporting this as a focal point and what is distracting from it. Oh, it's interesting is what happens is that white eraser mark pops forward. I almost see that as on top of the dog, so it's messing with my positive and negative spatial awareness. Whoa. Okay, is that the mark you were just talking about? This one right here? I wonder. You're welcome, Matilda. So, oh yeah, 13. You guys mentioned that. That's so cool. Okay. Here's my thought though. Is before I do that, I need to establish some of the values here. So what may be one of the reasons that may be projecting forward is that there's no connection to other areas in the background. It's that concept of the good continuation, the Gestalt principle, that we tend to see things that belong together when they're moving kind of in the same direction, or we're good at kind of connecting between forms when they're broken up. So before I do that, I know I need to lighten this area up. So I'm going to do that first. Still doesn't work. So the reason is that sharp edge over here. It's such a distinct shape that it was really projecting forward. So hopefully as I just kind of feather this out, and so feathering out, but also providing more areas in the background to connect that to. So now as I go through, I'm trying to be selective about where I sharpen the edges. The other thing to think about too is I just thought of it here. So this mark here parallels the direction of that ear. That's a dangerous mark, because then if we look at it, the viewer can look at it and says, well, if this is moving in that direction, that ear is moving in that direction, they must belong together. So that brings that background forward. It could also be an interesting mark. So before I get rid of it, I think I do want to get rid of it. I think it's healthy to kind of just let it sit a little bit and then evaluate. So what I really should be doing is bringing marks away from that ear and running in a different direction. So just using the kneaded eraser because it can help me to Helps me to control the pressure a little bit, and I can soften some of those edges, pick up some of the eraser debris. I don't know, what do we think? All right, let me see. This is distracting. I just want dark in that corner. Let's see what happens if I do that. Do I like it? I don't know. Let me do more of it and see if I like it. It's like eating a piece of candy and say, do I like that? I don't know. Let me try more. This much here is distracting. All right. I think overall I'm pretty happy with it so far. Going to clean up a little bit. I do think where do I need to sharpen? Right in here. So I'm going to sharpen by working in that negative space to refine that edge. And then in here I feel like I can sharpen up some of those wisps a little bit, targeting that negative space. But kind of breaking up that edge. So what I'm evaluating is this edge. We understand that the edge of the ear is there, but visually it's just all fractured by those fur things coming out in different directions. You can see I didn't go to vet school. Let's see. Maybe when looks like his tongue is hanging out. Oh yeah, maybe did I overstate that part down there? Let me see. Just give it a value wash. Kind of drop the whole thing down. It's hard to tell. It's all very subtle at this point. So now we're just making these quick kind of tweaks. I lost this loop here. Just going to suggest that. I don't know, see what that does. Let's see. I'm kind of liking the idea of kind of more expressive marks rather than details. I do feel like this, I think somebody else mentioned this thing here, I think is more of a distraction now than anything. So let me get a little bit more information there. I want to be careful not to outline it. So I'm looking for the kind of the shadow areas right in here and see how that does. Soften that edge just a bit. Not a very refined shape, but hopefully it's sufficient. Karen Lee 29, in my opinion, the darkness on the right side of his face, I guess that would be his face, it's an exaggeration of the contrast. Yeah, I can see that. Could be a little bit lighter. That's a really good That's really good feedback there. There's so much contrast between light and dark. And this is where, differences in monitors and stuff could play a role in all of this too. So, yeah, let me look into that. That's some really good feedback there. I think the dark, and then Zephy is saying, I think the dark area behind his back will look great if it's smeared to gradually blend with a lighter background above it. So just let me see what happens if we do that. Just kind of keep blending that out. Does that work better? I like that idea. Right now, yeah, okay. So let's see. Yeah, then there's Mary C. The change on the left side really did improve the drawing. Thanks for another. All right, you're welcome, everybody. All right, Dita. Perfect. Excellent. Thank you for the comments, Elena. Karen Lee 29. That's some good feedback. What am I doing? Right now, I'm kind of poking around. I was at the dentist I've been at the dentist a lot lately, and there's this point where they're just kind of poking around, trying to figure out, does that hurt? Does that hurt? Does that hurt? And I feel like I'm kind of in that mode right now. I'm just going to keep poking around to see if something really kind of reveals itself. Because I do think there is something to what Karen Lee 29 is saying about this shift here. And so the challenge there then is like, is this too dark or is that too light? It's in that value relationships, because we never understand values in isolation. We're always evaluating relationships between them. And so I'm thinking, and I'm thinking about leaning towards actually adding more darks here, in particular so that I can pull out some even brighter highlights. So as I look in this area, for example, there's some lighter highlights that come out here that come directly out of the snout, and then it gets a little bit darker behind it. And so I think I kind of exaggerated not only the darks on that side, but the light side on that shape. So that as you're observing there, I think it's in that dynamic. It's the push and pull between the two that I need to work. So I'm going to start by darkening this and see if that resolves the issue, and then lighten up. So if anybody else has any observations like that, we've got a little bit of time left over, and this is a good opportunity to, play around. What would happen if, right? We can do it to this drawing. It's just a drawing. I can only do another one if we need to. I'm not going to go wild by adding some crazy things in there that don't exist, but hopefully you get my point that, let's play around with it. Let's see what we can do with this thing. All right, so I'm just addressing some of the texture in the light side to add some richness there. And then I'm going to see what that of the dark side. And there's this little cool shadow here that there's this kind of wisp of fur casts. And then, I can bring out some light in here. Kind of forgot his eyebrow there for a little bit. Trying to think through the way the fur is flowing. And so this is the stage that you're all helping me advance through, which is, I think if I were working on my own right now, I would be setting this up. And in a day or two, I may look at this and see it in a completely different way and notice some of the things you're saying are totally different things, or may never catch what you're saying. But that's the benefit of working with a group. And it can be really intimidating to put your work out there And then, but if you found a group or at least an artistic partner that you connect with and can give you effective feedback, like you're all doing here, it can be really valuable. I just kind of reflecting on my origins as an artist, and I've always felt like I was fairly open-minded, but as I reflect on my earlier insecurities, I realized that there was a lot of stuff that I didn't really quite absorb, a lot of feedback that would have been really helpful if I was aware of it at the time, if I wasn't kind of absorbed in my own insecurities about kind of proving that I could do it. But I get it, you know, putting your work out there is very vulnerable, and I know there are people that have said hurtful things about my work without intention. They are trying to be helpful, but I either wasn't in the right space to take that feedback, or it was less tactful in its delivery than it could have been. So, but that's why I said I think when you can find a kind of a strategic partner in that way who can give you that feedback, it can be really valuable. So hopefully you all have somebody like that in your lives. So. You know, sometimes what drives the completion of a drawing too is just feeling like I'm done. like the drawing's not done, but I'm done. And I'm kind of at that stage right now. I felt like I was at that stage until that was a good, like I said, that was a good, really good comment there about this left side. And it has started to it kind of opened another door, gave me kind of a second wind in a way. But it's mentally exhausting, so. Yeah, Sue was saying, carefully don't bite when I poke around. Yeah, I don't think this dog would bite me. Awesome. Well, let's see. Dita Van Stiprian is saying, left cheek, maybe some hairs out of the cheek. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I totally didn't even see. He's got these whiskers coming out here. Let me see what happens if I go like this. I don't see any coming out of this. Out of that side. Neck at the right to the back. Let's see. It is at the light side. All right, well, thank you, everybody. If I feel like I'm missing some comments here, Dita, you had a comment about the right side of the, at the right to black. Is that the light side? Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I'm not sure if I'm interpreting your comments effectively, so if I haven't addressed your comments, let me know. I'm kind of curious what is there. I want to wrap this around a little bit. Give it a little more structure to his collar. What am I doing? All right. I'm under here. So now it's like, it's the little things. You know, we make big decisions at the beginning that are important. We make little decisions at the end that are just as important. Yeah, some of that paper is just not, it's not releasing the charcoal, but that's all right. Okay, let's see. Under his ear is very black, but the light is coming from the right. Yeah, the light's coming in from here. But looks like there's a change in color of the fur that also makes it look like shadow. So there's this stretch right in here where we're kind of getting some fur that's catching the light and some that's not. I'm just going to add a little bit of texture in here. So keeping the marks really light and loose, just providing some texture to see if that helps to anchor the ear a little bit more. And there's some light catching on some of the fur in there. Ultimately, it's the light and shadow that convey the texture. So if you're able to get the light and shadow working for you, you need less of that detail to convey the information. And then the viewer looks at it and kind of accepts it, starts to fill in that texture. Let's see, Monica J. Check lower lip thickness. It may just be the light. Yeah, it's really tricky. So in here, let me see if I can break it down logically. There's a little bit of light catching on the fur here. It's kind of mixing with some shaded fur. And then there's his mouth. And then there's light that catches under here on some of the fur, but there's also kind of dark fur. And then it gets a little bit lighter, as a kind of a glow under here. So tricky. So let me see. I'm going to make these little adjustments and see if it reveals anything. It's similar to, we talked about this in value and color relationships. Sometimes when they get really close to one another, it gets sometimes hard to determine, which one's lighter, which one's darker, which one's brighter, which one's duller. Like they're so close together. It's kind of like tuning a guitar by ear. When you're trying to compare two notes, the same note on two different strings, you can hear that it's off, but it's difficult to know which is high and which is low. And that can sometimes happen in a drawing too. And you just have to, just do stuff. So if there's something off here, I couldn't quite logically work my way through it. So I started to make marks and to see if it starts to affect anything positively. So all right, let's see. Just scrolling back through to see if I missed anything. Let's see. All right, let's see. Bono color needs to be darker. Should I make that darker? Let me go for it. My initial thought is just to leave it, because I worry that if it's going to get darker, it's going to distract from the dog. But that's a fear worth me playing out. And let me see. Let's just do it. And I can always lighten it up if I don't like it. I do like it. It didn't do a whole lot, but it just gave it a little bit more substance. I don't feel like it distracts, but it provides a little bit more to the narrative, I guess. Thank you for that comment. Let's see. I kind of like the way it solidifies that space. If you remove that, there's very little structure down in here. But adding that in there, it helps to make everything come together. I'm going to anchor a little bit more towards the bottom. And we'll see how that does. I kind of like that play between light and dark over here. All right. Whew. Oh, now data is saying now I look to the bone instead of the nose. Well, let me see what happens if I take it back. Let's see. I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, stamp it out, lift it up. Maybe that works. I don't know. Maybe one of those decisions that I let sit for a little bit. But that's what makes drawing so much fun. I think I want to add a little bit more structure to the back here. So in just a few areas, I'm going to sharpen that edge, alternating between sharpening the edge by darkening the background and then sharpening the edge by rendering the fur a little bit more. All right. Whew. All right. I really enjoy the back and forth here, different opinions, different ideas. Oh, that's right. I darkened this area, but I didn't come back to, I don't know if I can lift any more highlights in here. Let's see if that does anything. Does it make it work? There. Yeah, I do feel like now there's a little bit more contrast in here to pump up the structure, re-solidify that structure a little bit more. I'm going to darken that. In the reference, there's a little light catching in here, but I think I want to get rid of that. All right, and then let me see what happens if I just poke around in here. Kind of doing some kind of exploratory mining. See if there's anything of value in here. I do like that. So by lifting a little bit along that edge, it starts to create a little bit more reflected light that hopefully creates a bit more depth in there. That was a really good observation about that shadow shape. I think it was a little bit too dominant before. All right, I think I'm going to call it. It's been a day, and I need to start working on the preparatory drawing for next week. We're going to be doing a cat, a lounging cat, again to help us prepare for the competition. It looks like some of you are planning on entering, but if you're curious, there's the Best in Show competition at Artist Network. So I pinned that at the top of the chat if you're interested. There is also in the description below the video is a link to the show page. So if you want to share your own drawing. If you do want feedback, just let me know. I don't generally provide substantive feedback and suggestions for improvement unless I'm asked. So, but I'm always willing to provide what I can. So if you do want feedback and you want to put it out there to the group, feel free to post it on artistnetwork.com. So again, we meet every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern to draw together. So I will see you all next week. I want to take a quick look at this. Looks like we've got some. Melissa saying it doesn't have to be super realism, does it? No, it can. And I know, who knows, next week I may take an entirely different approach to drawing the cat, where maybe there's a higher degree of realism. But I try to keep things down to about 2 hours for this show. So that kind of limits me in terms of some of that realism and the detail. But I think if I were to continue to work on this to add additional refinement to it, you're not going to see me really make any substantive decisions that you haven't already seen me make. It's a matter of kind of executing and kind of getting into that headspace where I can just focus on those details. And again, there's nothing to say that it's right or wrong. You find your own approach to it. So yeah, that's where it is right now. I do kind of like a little bit of expression in some of the marks, but I certainly have some days when I'm like, I just need to focus and do some tight detail work. And I've gone through big phases in my artistic practice where I've swung wildly from hyper detail to more abstract and more expressive, and that's okay too. I kind of encourage you to do both, and you don't have to show everything. So if you are more inclined to do stronger expressive work, more bold stuff, and you want to try out just doing that fine detail stuff, you don't have to show it to anybody. You can just do it, and it can be helpful sometimes to help provide that context, or vice versa. So hopefully you kind of take time to really just experiment for yourself. But hopefully, hopefully this captures the expression of the dog. I think it does to some degree. It's a fun little guy to draw. So thank you all for joining me. I appreciate all the positive feedback and the substantive comments. You really helped me through some of these trouble spots. So I want to welcome you if you're new. Hopefully we'll see you again next week, everybody. So thank you. Have a fantastic weekend.